It Welcome to Derry is HBO's show that's probably going to be seeing us through to Christmas, and with it starting on the week of Halloween, it went all out horror on us, especially right at the end. Rarely does a show introduce us to a set of characters that we think are going to be at the heart of the story and then kill them off straight away, but this one was more than happy to do that. With themes focusing around control, grief, and set around a time that was riddled with conspiracy fueled by the Cold War and also racism too. This incorporated all of that into the story, and it seems like it's gonna be a major part. So with that, let's dive into the first episode and break it down. Here is It Welcome to Derry Episode 1, Ending Explained. The opening scene's connection to the ending. The opening scene of this first episode is one that holds a lot of importance. With it opening up at the Capitol Theatre, which Hank, father of Ronnie, works at, and with it being the location where Matty was last seen 4 months ago. We heard through Ronnie that her father was being blamed for the disappearance. This is something that's telling of the time due to racism being present at what was once considered one of the least diverse states in the United States of America, so it provided a backdrop of the overall mood. With us not really seeing much of Matty or understanding his mindset during the beginning due to him just being on his own, we saw him getting kicked out of the theatre and then walking down a road with the hopes of getting out of Derry because it seemed like maybe he come from a slightly abusive family, at least his father, and he wanted to be away from the likes of him. With Matty walking on an open road on a cold dark night on his own, it felt representative of not only a January 4th evening, but also his mindset and how he felt like his life was. Matty didn't have anybody. As we heard through Phil and Teddy, his mother was offering candy to students if they went to his birthday party, and even Lils denied him a kiss, which made him feel like she didn't like him. So the environment and the way that it was really complemented the position that he was in. When the family that was driving through picked him up, they were welcoming, but that soon changed. The mother went into labour and gave birth to this mutant baby that had 2 heads and was the very reason as to why Matty went missing, as it flew directly into him and was responsible for him then being trapped, showing that Pennywise maybe manifested himself in the form of that family. Within the opening scene, we also heard the motif that was at the heart of this first episode that featured in the movie in the cinema, Music Man, which had the word trouble being spoken over and over again. Something that highlighted that the likes of Matty and the other children were in trouble. With Lily and Ronnie also later confirming that they heard that song through the pipes, it showed that it's most likely going to feature heavily throughout the show. Considering that Music Man is also about a conman that arrives in a town, that also ties into the family potentially being controlled by the likes of Pennywise, as he was conning Matty in that moment. Matty was looking for a way out of Derry and the family offered to take him to Portland. However, they drove him right back into the heart of the town before the labour took place, showing that Derry was a town that in that instance wasn't going to let anybody leave. This actually really reminded me of the show From, with the lack of being able to escape being a main thing, but also in the way that the jump scares were carried out and the way that fears were at the heart of it. With words such as cadaver and strangulation being spelt by the sun, that was when the show was hinting that something sinister was definitely going to be going on. The opening scene obviously connected to the ending as well, as the episode concluded where it started inside of the Capitol Theatre with the Music Man being played on the screen. However, as we saw, with Matty appearing on the screen and blaming Lily and everybody else there, which we knew could well be Pennywise leaning into the fear that Phil, Lily and Teddy had as they all felt partially responsible for Matty's disappearance and crying moments before the movie aired. With more deaths occurring at the location of the opening scene and it being the last place that now Matty, Teddy, Phil and Susie were all seen at, the authorities will try and pin it on Hank all over again, and it will most likely aim to provide a commentary of what it was like to be black at that time in that area. There was a line of dialogue that was spoken during the closing scene which was from the movie The Music Man, which was, "An idle mind is a devil's playground." This was an important line because that's very much how Pennywise works, leaning into the fear that the potential victims have, and with Pennywise being the devil in this scenario, it basically highlighted how he operated. What I also quite liked about this opening scene was that the show made out like Matty could quite well have been the one that was going to go on and cause trouble. A young, lonely, pale-faced boy. It had all the makings of that family being in trouble when they opened the door, but it turned out to be the family that were the ones causing trouble. That was a small twist in the opening scene that I thought worked really well, and it was almost like a hint towards the twist of everybody being killed right at the end. The Losers Club. Within the Losers Club in this show, at least for the first episode, there was Lily, who spoke of how her father was killed by an accident at the pickle jar factory because he went back in for a toy that she had and got caught up with an issue of a machine where he tried to fix it by climbing inside, but was ultimately crushed. This then connected back to why she was being bullied at school with the pickle jars in the locker, because there was a rumor going round that his body parts were in loads of different jars. This instantly made her not really a credible source and somebody that people thought was crazy, especially with her going to Juniper Hill following her father's death, which is a psychiatric hospital in Derry. So with her hearing Matty's voice in the pipes after thinking back to that kind heart that he showed her in giving her the turtle charm for her bracelet, Matty's bloody finger appeared through it and told her that he wasn't letting him leave when she told him to come back. With Teddy and Phil, they didn't trust Loopy Lils, as the students at school called her because of the reputation that she adopted. However, once Teddy had his own experience of seeing his lampshade being made of the skin of concentration camp victims at Buchenwald, where the likes of Ilse Koch was based, arguably the strongest jump scare occurred when Teddy had the moaning lampshade of faces rolling towards him after it spent time flickering. In having a change of heart and finding out that Ronnie was the last person to see Matty alive, and her also experiencing hearing the sound of children struggling and like they were in pain, this is what led the group to go to the Capitol Theatre, and why it was that Teddy, Phil, and Phil's younger sister Susie, who definitely didn't deserve to be roped into the horrors that were there, to end up being killed in the most horrific of fashions by the flying mutant baby. Lily was left alive, and I think she was left alive because the likes of Pennywise will know how the people of Derry will perceive her, and she'll be subjected to the likes of Juniper Hill again, where she won't be taken seriously. Even her closest friend Marge was getting sick of being associated with her because of the ripple effect in how people perceived her. It was a major shock that they were all killed off like that in that epic final scene, but it was so perfect and felt reminiscent of the type of horror that you get in classic horror movies. Major Hanlon's storyline. Hanlon's storyline is one that I think felt like it was focused on representing the tone and mood of the country of the time. Despite Major Hanlon's successes in being part of the Air Force, there were certain members of the 79th Squadron, such as Masters, that didn't respect him because of the colour of his skin. There was also a look that was shared between Hanlon and the driver, where it was as if he was trying to make Hanlon aware that things weren't going to be as easy as the General was making them out to be, especially when it came to the Category 1 restricted area. This was a time in America where the likes of conspiracy was at a high point. The Cold War was brewing with Russia when it came to nuclear weapons, and both countries were essentially placing themselves into a ready position to fight if it came to it. There was the space race, and there was also assassinations that occurred which caused the likes of conspiracies to run wild amongst the public. It was a hostile time for different generations, as we saw with Hanlon preparing to fly the new B-52, and also with Bert the Turtle saying duck and cover and planting war in the hearts and minds of young students. Hanlon was painted out to be a man that was loyal to his country, and we first heard it when he was speaking to General Shaw and how he was committed in completing his work and essentially flying into the eye of the storm if need be. And we also heard the General talking about his father being his inspiration, and that the only thing that he loved more than his country was his family. During the evening, the B-52 specs were being requested from Hanlon by masked individuals when they broke into his room, and if they didn't hand them over, then it was said that he'd be killed. However, the attacker was never going to go through with it. Hanlon noticed the body language of somebody that was in the room under a mask, and I wonder if he felt like it could well have been Masters that was a part of it. It would make sense, seeing as though he said earlier on that he'd get him next time, or maybe he was the leader. However, we saw the loyalty that Hanlon showed in that moment. It wouldn't actually surprise me if the likes of the General ended up orchestrating that attack. Through Hanlon, we're seeing the racism that's present and the hostility that was present throughout the nation due to many Americans feeling as though they were on the brink of war. With Phil mentioning how the airbase could well be a cover-up for something else, it seems like that's going to be the case due to the closed doors that were there with the restricted access, so I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen there. My review of the episode. HBO has these shows that they release where you can just tell that they put more effort in, more money in, and they care so much more about them, and this one is definitely one of them. The way that the story was told in this episode was just so easy to follow. I loved the secular nature that it had in starting at the theatre and ending there, and also the sheer boldness in killing off characters that we came to get behind and root for. I genuinely thought that they were all going to be in it for the season, but they didn't hold back. It was shocking, but I respected it. The opening scene really did paint the backdrop to the tone of this show, and I thought it was executed so well. From the colour palette to the silence that was present and then contrasting it with the sheer chaos in the car, it was just perfect. In terms of the performances, I thought they were all pretty strong. The characters Matty, Lily, and Teddy were probably the strongest out of the younger cast, but I also thought the likes of Hanlon was performed really well too. He's a likeable character, and I'm intrigued to see what's actually going on inside of that airbase. When it came to the moments of horror within this first episode, that final sequence, which was around 5 minutes long and was just filled with blood and gore, was disgustingly perfect. When Teddy hit that window, I was genuinely like, whoa, I didn't expect it. Also, the way the camera moved in as Lily let out that scream felt so encapsulating of 60s cinema, and I loved it. The visual effects weren't necessarily incredible, and I feel like I have seen better, but I didn't let that distract me too much because they weren't horrific. But what I will say, to be fair, is how do you make a giant mutant baby that's flying through the air look like something from our reality? It's just simply not, so it's okay. What was a telling sign for me that this was an episode of television that I was really enjoying was that even though it was only 50 minutes long, it managed to pack so much into it and it didn't feel rushed in the slightest. This is definitely going to be the show of the season because you can tell a lot of thought and hard work has gone into it. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you, but It Welcome to Derry is definitely worth a watch. What did you think of the first episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.